Well. It is Friday, February 23, 2024. And this is, what is this? Season 8, episode 8, everybody. Welcome to the Pastor's Roundtable. I am Anselm Paul, and I am honored to be here tonight with our co-host, our guest co-host, Pastor Paul Goodridge.
Hey, hi, everybody.
And the ever-effervescent Stephanie Scott.
Hey, good evening.
All
and
right.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath. Glad to have you both with us. Neither of you are strangers to the Pastor's Roundtable. We're excited that you're with us tonight. We are missing our co-host, our regular co-host, Dr. Dion Henry, Pastor Roger Wade. Neither of them were able to be with us tonight. Ministry gets busy, Paul.
Yeah, it does. Well, I think, I'm not sure if he already shared, but with Roger, there's a particular reason why he can't be with us in terms of he had a death in the family. So
yeah,
we want to remember that.
So we want to keep him lifted up as well. And our brother, other co-host, is traveling this weekend, so we want to keep him lifted up as well. Well, listen, if you are just joining us tonight, you've joined us on the last Friday night of Black History Month, our Black History Month series. We've had a great series this month. We kicked off the month talking about a very intriguing topic. We started talking about the white church and Black history, and how those things have intersected and interfaced over the years and over the development, particularly within the Seventh-day Adventist context. On week number 2, we talked about urban evangelism. Powerful episode, Stephanie, that we had that evening with Pastor John Boston and Pastor, I got to get his name.
Horace
Montgomery, that's right. And if you missed that episode, what can they do, Steph, if they missed any of these episodes, actually, that we talked about?
If you missed any of those episodes that we've done, and even Slave Food that we did last week, you want to go to the PRT.live, our website, where not just those 3 programs are on, but you have 7 seasons to catch up and check out all of our programs.
That's right. So you can check. Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying that's a lot.
Yeah, Paul.
You could binge watch that in a weekend, maybe.
Yeah, good luck with that. These are hour and a half programs.
You can't, because we're already at near 140 episodes, I want to say. I've taken a couple times to try and count. So, yeah, if you have 140 hours to spare.
Mercy. All right. Well, listen, but there's great content that we've always had week after week here at the Pastor's Roundtable. And so we want to invite you to go back, check out some of those past episodes. And we are excited about tonight. We're going to be talking about a very perhaps not talked about enough topic, Paul, when we talk about mental health and the Black church.
Absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, before we jump in there, and you all can keep talking, but I just want to encourage our viewers to make sure that you shout out and put where you're from, so that we can give you a shout out, but as we're doing our introduction, so we don't take too much time later on. So go ahead.
Absolutely. Listen, if you are joining us from anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, we want you to drop that in the chat. We want to see where you are and that you're here. Just shout out your church. I see my camera. I was not seeing this chat. I see, hey, there's Rogers in the chat.
Yeah.
Who else? Hey, there's Mama Patrick in the chat saying greetings to my PRT family from the beautiful Twin Island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Camera Graying is in the chat saying happy Sabbath to all. Let's see, are they coming up? There they are.
Yeah,
all right. And then there's Doc Wade in the chat. He says we are coming up to 100. Oh, I skipped one there.
Watching from LaGuardia. Mercy.
What is that? That's LaGuardia?
Yeah. LaGuardia Airport. Pastor Wade, you might want to sit next to some folks and share. This is a ministry.
Exactly.
We're not passing out tracts anymore. Well, we should be passing out the globe tracts, but we also can be telling people, hey, have you checked this out? So to the man or the lady sitting next to you, make sure you share this video with them.
All right.
Be an urban evangelist.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, in the airport. Good stuff. Well, listen, we want to invite you at this point before we're talking about mental health and the Black church, the impact that mental health has on the Black church, and probably even the other way around, the impact that the Black church has on mental health, particularly in the African American communities. And we want you to take this opportunity now to share this program. Some of you know somebody in your church or in your community that has been impacted or needs to be impacted by this conversation this evening. And so we want you to take the opportunity right now to share. I can't do it like Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry is our hype man when it comes to sharing. Paul, let's let Paul give it a go. Paul's a preacher.
Go.
Paul, we're gonna ask our audience to share. Give it your best appeal.
Okay, Paul doesn't have it. So here it
mercy.
is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Share, hit the like button, share it on Facebook, like it on YouTube. We want to get to 100 viewers at least live tonight, if not more. So please share. We're right at about, on our screen, it looks like it's about 47. So if everybody hits it and shares to one person, we'll be close to our goal. So we want to make sure you share. And we do want to give a shout out to Sister Cindy Paul. Hey, good evening. Nice to see you. And I see Sister Black in the chat, so we want to say hey to her. And Karen Martin Vila, happy Sabbath from San Diego, California.
San Diego.
And Irving in Portsmouth, Virginia. So,
okay. Yeah. Cindy said, Doctor Who? Stephanie stole Dr. Henry's job. Oh my, Dr. Henry.
He's not watching, so it's all good.
All right. Okay. All right. Good stuff. Well, listen, we are excited again to get into this tonight. We're talking about mental health, often not talked about enough topic within our community. Sometimes we leave this type of a conversation to other communities to spend time talking about and delving into, but we want to get into this thing tonight. Stephanie, we have a special guest that has joined us tonight. Why don't you tell us who has joined us at the table this evening?
Oh, some of you may be familiar with this gentleman. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for probably more than 30 years. And so at the table we have Mr. Garry Graham from New York City. He's going to give us a little bit more information about himself, but we look forward to the conversation this evening.
All right. Well, let's bring him on. Garry is no stranger to the Pastors Roundtable. He is a PRT alum, but not just that. He is a schoolmate, I think, of just about maybe everybody on here tonight. We go all the way back to Oakwood College, the college days, not university, exactly. Paul, but college days.
No, college. Under Dr. Benjamin Reeves. I am of the tribe of Benjamin.
Tribe of Benjamin.
Well, he goes back further than that because he started his college career at Andrews University. That's where I know him, so I've known him before that. Okay. Everybody may not know that Garry is an Andrews Cardinal.
Yeah. And, before the show, Garry, I heard you say something about Andrews and knowing Steph from Andrews, but I was thinking it was on the other end of Oakwood, but it predates Oakwood.
Predates Oakwood.
Wow. All right.
You're muted. You're muted.
We can't hear you.
I should know better, right? I was there for a little while. I was there for a little while. From Brooklyn to Andrews and ended up in Oakwood, where I really found my bearings and been blessed to meet a lot of friends and do a lot of business with a lot of our friends, and completely blessed that we can talk about it 30 years tonight. So looking forward to talk about mental health and how we could bring its awareness or heighten its awareness within the church.
All right. Well, hey, let's go ahead and jump in, you guys. This is going to be a fascinating discussion. I think is going to be beneficial to our audience tonight. Those who are watching live, those of you that may be watching on the replay, want you to make sure that you share this as well. But Pastor Goodridge, would you start us off, Doc, with a quick word of prayer, and then we'll just hop right in.
Absolutely. Father, we want to thank you for this opportunity. In fact, another opportunity to live, to learn, and to love. For where there is life, there is hope. Lord, I'm asking that you would be with this conversation, that you would give us clarity of speech and clarity of thought, that you would illuminate our minds. And please allow us to follow where you are already leading.
Yes.
These and other mercies we ask in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 All right. Well,
All right.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna jump off the bridge for. Ooh, I probably shouldn't use
Don't
that
do that.
reference when we're talking
Don't do
about
that.
mental
Hey,
health. So
Yeah,
I will
that'll
lead
help.
out.
Counselor,
I will lead out
counselor.
with questions.
Well, let me start right there. Since one of my jobs that I had, and this is for real, that if you in New York City, some of us who come through New York City, and you look on the bridge, there's a yellow box on the bridge. And when you open that yellow box, is a telephone in there, and it automatically goes to somebody on the other line to stop you from talking on the bridge. So if you ever go on the bridge in New York City, you see a blue light with a yellow box. That yellow box is a
Wow.
suicide hotline for that. So, God is with us, and you started off on the right thing. So now you can open the box, and now you can ask me any questions so I can stop you from
So
jumping
what
off
you're
the
saying,
bridge.
Gary, is that you and people like you are who's on the other line, on the
Yeah.
other side of that line.
I actually had that job.
Wow.
I actually had that job. So that person will open the phone, and it goes directly, bypasses everybody, and it'll come to my desk. And
Listen, that sounds like prayer. Look, we
yeah,
open the word. Look, and bypass the pastors and bypass everybody and go to Jesus.
e-
But I'm not gonna
exactly.
preach.
Listen,
So,
Steph, before you hit that first question, let's dig in just a little bit here
right.
more, Gary. Tell us and our audience just a little bit. I know you've done this before when you've been with us on the Pastors Roundtable, but give us a
Mhm,
little bit of your background, on what you studied, what you've done, and what you're doing
mhm.
now, just to kind of a little familiarize yourself with our audience tonight.
So, like everybody, uh, my degree has nothing to do with what I do. Right? I graduated from Oakwood in the '94. This is our 30th year, by the way,
Yeah.
Wow.
with a master's in history, and my uh, minor was in business. So that's the business part. Then I went to New York University. I got a master's in rehab counseling, and then you put all those certificates together: gambling certificates, uh, substance abuse certificates, DUI certificates, and ironically, one of my favorite stories. While I was working at my first job, I went and I got my second master's in public health
Oh,
at SUNY Downstate. So, Paul, from SUNY Downstate, that's across the street from Kings County.
Hmm.
Quick, I was the first speaker for graduation for SUNY Downstate School of Public Health, and that was about 8, 9 years ago. Still struggling with the doctorate. Found myself right before the pandemic in 2019, opened my own private practice, and they call me a unicorn because basically there are really not a lot of Black male counselors or
Hmm.
therapists. So
Hmm.
my specialty is boys, and my specialty also is grief counseling.
wow.
Boys because it's academic, right? I have a son, and I'll say this proudly: I've raised a good boy. He's a man now, so I can't speak for him as a man, but I could speak to that certain things that we put in action raise the boy in New York City. There's certain things you have to do as to raise your boy, and we could get into that later. On the other side, the grief is because, if for those who don't know, my last name is Graham. I am related to Patrick and Paul Graham, who are pastors, and I have very good relationships with a lot of pastors because I went to Oakwood, and I saw the burden of funeralizing our saints, but not. But we have a problem putting their legacy together, and we have a problem grieving them. So I give you a great case in point. Like Benjamin Reeves just passed away. That's 30 years ago. And so there's a flood of emotions that comes in right now because you remember that was our president.
Yeah.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And so no matter how much money you collect, how much you do, I just personally think that as African Americans in the church, we have an issue putting a legacy to the people who has built us. Period. End of story. You know, so I talk about that a lot. So every Monday night, I have grief counseling in a group, and then the last part of that, we were talking off the air over a year now, and you hear it all the time. Anytime there's a disaster or something happens, we have grief counselors on the scene. That's your boy right there. That's me.
Okay.
And going to do that, I realize even as a Seventh-day Adventist, death is unexpected, and death comes to everyone. And so it has made me realize that my life or our lives, we have to live our days as is our last and live for Christ. Because I can tell you stories for days that people, you see them one day and you don't see them the next day. You know, people who are exercise buffs ride 100 miles across the country, muscle upon muscle, they drop dead the next day. Or people you would not believe. So I'm in a great place, and I'm glad to talk about it, and I'm glad to give everybody solutions to what you can do in your church or your conference or your personal life to keep a balance for your mental health.
Well, I'm gonna jump in here then, if that's okay, because you're saying a lot of stuff that sort of speaks to I guess my first question, but hold that solution thing because I think we're going to come around to that toward the end. So I'm looking forward to that. You talked about the legacy. You referenced Dr. Benjamin Reeves and the recent passing of him, and you talked about the church's response. So, in general, what is the Black church's response? And I'm gonna put a little caveat in here. The Black church, if you can speak generally, because I know that you have been, you don't just engage with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is one of the things that's very impressive about your work and your ministry. But generally speaking, what's the Black the Black church and the Black community's disposition toward mental health? And if you can speak maybe even a little bit toward the Seventh-day Adventist Church and mental health. And is it favorably viewed, or is it becoming favorably viewed? Because I think that there has been some negative connotations in the Black community historically. So as that, what's the view of the Black community and the Black church as it relates to mental health?
Well, I'll start off by saying when we think of mental health, we think of crazy. Pastor Goodridge is crazy, right? If Pastor Goodridge tomorrow during service with the audience that Oakwood University Church has goes up there crying and decides to run to the back of the church and run back to the front of the church in all sincerity and honor to God, he would be deemed crazy, or he will be checked out, and he'll tell you, no, I'm all right. The Holy Spirit came over me. And today, you don't know what has happened between him. You don't know if he has been fighting cancer. You don't know if he found out last night his wife stopped breathing for 2 hours and he did not decide to reveal it. And during his prayer, he decides to celebrate and thank God in a non-Adventist tradition to bust down the center aisle and bust back. By tomorrow night at this time, Paul will be trending and people will be asking if he's okay. And just for peace, we probably will not see Paul at Oakwood University for the next 4 or 5 weeks until he's okay. And he's completely fine. So our church and our community has already labeled us before we are labeled. That's the first thing. And so we are so afraid to go to a therapist or to talk about our problems is because we're afraid to be labeled. Before you go to a therapist, you have to be, we're afraid to talk to one another because we're afraid that people are going to gossip about certain things. So I'll use Stephanie in this case. Steph, I know you for a long time. I've fallen short. I needed a G. All right. So Gary, I got you. And then Stephanie will tell people, well, Gary needed $1,000 or what have you. And we're friends. And she gossips is like, well, I don't know what he needed it for or whatever. And it goes around. Gary's having financial trouble where he probably just needed money for the next check. And we're so ready to hurt people when they're down. We don't even also kick them down. We bury them. And we're good for that. And then unfortunately, there's not enough shovels and there's not enough friends to dig you back out. Man, I just needed a G2. Huh? But
it almost sounds like, Gary, and I'm sorry, but it sounds like you're saying that we impose a mental health situation on somebody, a poor mental health. We create that narrative, and that by creating the narrative, we create the reality. Is that where we're going?
Absolutely.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's redeemable and it can be fixed almost immediately. But we let it go on so long, then it becomes a crisis within a crisis. We take something small and we make it bigger than ever. So, so we have done better, but we can do better. So that's exactly it. So those two scenarios are actually true scenarios that we have seen. So if you go onto any website of any church right now, I could tell you that the badge for 988, which is the universal number for mental health, it's not there. It's not there. But I could tell you the basketball game that's going to be played at Riverside tomorrow night will be there. I could tell you who's preaching at Oakwood tomorrow, and I could tell you who's preaching at Loma Linda tomorrow. But I don't know if something happens to somebody tonight, if they could call 988, which is a universal number, and you could talk to somebody right away. And if they can't handle it, they send a mobile crisis team to your house within the next hour or two.
So can I ask a quick question? So is it just that the Universal 988 helpline, if posted on conference websites or local church websites, where does that go? Like when somebody calls that number, who do they get? Do they get you? Do they get the church? Do they get the pastor? Do they get the conference?
Oh, that's a great question, Stephanie. So 988, if you call it right now, it goes to your local mental health office. So if you're in Huntsville, it goes to whoever has that, who's in charge of that in Alabama, and there will be a counselor on the other line. In fact, I'll tell everybody in the chat right now, go ahead and call 988. Pick it up, and somebody will call, Garry Graham, how can I help you? So it's not just for suicide. It is for any mental health issue that they can't talk to. So I tell people this. Talk to your friends first. If you can't find a friend, get a counselor. If you can't get a counselor, those are the two things, because sometimes some things could be solved amongst friendship. Some things can't be solved amongst friendship. So 988, I will press anybody who's in communication to make sure that we put that 988. If you call your local mental health office, they will give you free digital information to put on your website. You could slap it on. Something that I always wanted to see, and I'll say, when I was a little boy, you see on the bottom, it'll say, Stephanie Scott, nurse on duty. I would love to see Paul Goodridge, counselor on duty. In fact, I think we need a counselor in church more so than a nurse in church, because if Paul Goodridge goes up there and start preaching the word and he start crying, everybody going to start crying, and somebody's soul is going to be touched, and then they're going to have to say, I need to talk to somebody right now. I've done something. I don't want to go home. There's something that's going on that needs to happen. And so there's thousands of rooms at church at OU University, or in Florida, or of course in Riverdale. I use Riverdale. Even at my church at Ephesus, that you could quietly go into that room and talk about it, more so than the nurses will see. So I would love to see that happen. And so that's a kind of a personal crusade that I'm going for.
Well, I will say, at Oakwood, so there's a couple of things that you said that I really appreciate, and I think I'm going to try to do that. In terms of, we have a weekly bulletin, so to speak, that we send out, and as part of the announcements, I want to put that 988 number, just as a reminder to the members or whoever watching, that if you are getting into a crisis, then you can call that. The other thing is, within our church, we have a social work task force, and we have somebody who is on duty every Sabbath, so that if there is a situation in which either somebody is in crisis, or they are equipped to be able to identify individuals who could possibly be in crisis, that they are there to take that person, go into a quiet room to do that. So I hear you, and I applaud your plea for that, and I join with you in every church having some form of that available for the members.
Did you hear the part when I said that you was going to run out of the?
I did.
Don't run through the church tomorrow.
Don't run.
No, it's funny you say that, and maybe I'm being a little personal, but there have been a couple of times at church where I have been overwhelmed by the Spirit of God and the emotion of the moment, and I have cried. I have found myself crying, in terms of preaching, and the reaction from people has been varied, mixed. People thinking that something may be wrong. Some people, trying to check, see if everything's okay. But whenever it comes to anything that seems like we're just we don't have our act together, the plastic smile, the fake, whatever you call it, then we don't really know what to do with that. We don't really know what to do with authenticity or emotions. So yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that. But I think within 5 to 7 years, it will happen. I think there's a lot more suicides in our church that happens. I think there's a lot of bullying that goes on from a kid's level and an adult level. There's a lot of bullying on the adult level that goes on, and then there are people in our church that are re-traumatized over and over and over again. So we just need to kind of hit that back with constant healing. You have to bathe yourself every day to get the dirt off, right? But if you don't bathe yourself every day, you're going to get stuff growing on you that you never thought would grow on you. So we have to have a daily routine of mental health, and it can be done. I've seen it done.
Gary, I have a question in terms of some of this is just coming up as we go. Um, we've talked about, and a lot of times when we talk about mental health, and you mentioned it before, but I want to kind of drill down on it. Many people think that you need a mental health counselor only when you're feeling suicidal. What are some of the other scenarios that persons may need a mental health counselor for? Because people may be saying, okay, 988, but I'm only going to call that number if I'm getting ready to jump off that bridge. If I'm not getting ready to jump off that bridge, then who needs that number? Who's going to call that number? What are the scenarios that they're going through?
Okay. So let me start with what you said in the beginning, right? Suicide looks like this.
Hmm.
And if everybody looks at Paul, Stephanie, and Paul, that's what suicide looked like. You don't have to be crying and you don't have to be sad. Perfect example, Robin Williams, who has passed away. Suicide does not come out of the blue. It is something that is caked on week by week,
Hmm.
week by week. And we learn to hide our mental illness. Mental illness is about admission and talking. The unfortunate thing about admission and talking, we as Black folk, we do that, but the receiver doesn't believe that. That's where it is. So it's like I go back to I could call Stephanie and said, Stephanie, I really feel bad. I'm not feeling like myself. Right? And this could be a real. I'm telling because I personally know her and I personally know you, Paul. And Stephanie will say, Nah, not you, Gary. You always fun. That's all right. You bugging out or whatever. I'll see you tomorrow. Right?
Mm.
But just because I just use the word. Just because I didn't kill myself, doesn't mean that I'm okay.
Hmm.
Okay. And so I may go to Stephanie 10 times, and out of those 10 times, we may go to lunch or we may sit together in church. Or she's like, Gary, you usually have your hair cut. How come you didn't have your hair cut? That's not like you. Show genuine concern. But friends know friends, and friends are responsible for friends. I didn't say
Hmm.
your wife, and I didn't say your kids. Okay. And I'm about to tell you, we all know this here. We all have partners here. We know how to hide from our partners. Because my wife will call me and say, Oh, you got your angry eyebrows on again. But I don't want her to know that I'm worrying about certain things. So I
Mhm.
know how to mask her in the daytime. So we all know how to do that. But you know who I can't, you know who I cannot, and this is personal, I cannot hide from my brothers, and I cannot hide from my parents, and I cannot hide from my good friend. I have like two or three good friends. Can't hide from them.
Mm.
I don't know what the balance is. Some things that I cannot explain in a book, but some people can identify certain things that other people can't identify. But if I live with you over the last 23 years, I know what to hide from you. Like said my son said to me the other day, he said, Daddy, you look like you never worry about money. I was like, okay, come to my room between the hours of 3 and 5. Right? See you laughing because
Right.
y'all know what I'm talking about, right? And you
Yeah.
see the twisting and turning or goes what's up. So I think Black friendship is paramount. And at Oakwood, I'm gonna use this is that I can still, even though Paul and I are not boys, I can
Mhm.
call him under the Oakwood umbrella, and I'm using all of this as a man. I'm not feeling like myself today, and we could have this 6 week friendship to hold the line. And he said, Gary, you're not the only one. And we're
Mhm.
so afraid to have that love conversation. But you know who has those conversations? People who are not Black.
Mm.
So
I'm just telling y'all right now. Our
so
other,
let me
yeah, go ahead.
our Caucasian brothers and other people are used to venting their emotions. So
Mm.
from we're talking about Black history. So what in just in your experience, what is the stigma that you've identified for Black people? Why, as Black folk, do we not readily make our mental health a priority. Quite frankly, we had slave Dr. Wood, who I believe I saw in the chat, was in here. Um, Black folks taking care of their physical health and their mental health has always been a little bit of a challenge, and even more so for both for Black men. So, where does that come from?
Just before
Every
you
day
answer
for
that, Gary, I just want to
ourselves.
welcome Dr. Chester, who has joined us now.
Oh,
Good evening, Dr. Chester. So glad to have you with us.
I feel like I'm behind the eight ball.
That's okay. We're just going to pick up right where we are, but we're glad that you made it. We're going to let Gary go ahead and answer that question, and then we'll come back and more formally introduce you.
yeah. So
If I
if you
could,
could just to restate can you hear me? Just to restate the question, why is mental health a stigma in the Black community and specifically for Black men?
Mm.
I think Busta Rhymes said it the best, that we're expected to be strong all the time. Uh, you see how we're portrayed on TV. Our intelligence is not portrayed as much as our physical prowess, and we always seem to be that we have to be macho and solve everything. So I see that we have stigmatized our own self by not talking, by not going to a therapist, especially if you have a good job. If you have an HR department, they have like EAPs, they have all these things. And
What's
it
the
goes
EAP,
back as
Gary?
far as this. Stephanie,
What's the EAP?
EAP is employment. EAP
Employee
is
Assistance
employment
Program.
as a program, and they give you 5 to 10 free counseling services, so you can have counseling. So even if I have it, my wife can do it, or my kids can do it. But guess who use all their EAPs? Not our brothers and sisters. It's like when you found out in your 401k, instead of putting in 6%, you could have found out that you could have been putting 13% all these years. That's the same thing with EAP. You can do that, and you could take the time off from work. You can make sure that you're mentally fit, and hired by the number one law firm in the country to do 4 hours a week just for mental health, because they want their lawyers to be sharp where that is. And so I'll say this, I'm going to tell you where this has all started from. When our kids were little in the public school system, and I'm going to die by this when I say this, is that we all think that when our kids have a problem in cradle roll and in primary treasure, we don't want our kids to be labeled, and we're afraid to get this IAP or go into special education, right? You'll be surprised how many non-people of colors kids are in IAP and in special education, because they can read better, so they can comprehend better, so they can play with OT and physical exercise better, and they going off to the upper schools, Big 10 schools, Harvard, or they may be on the waiting list for Duke, and they go to next week, while we wallow when your kids is grinding on the ground, throwing toys at other kids, and you say that they don't need help. We have to admit that we have an issue so we can help the issue. And it has worked. So if your kid can't read at 3, get the extra help to read, and you'll find your kid, reading better. If he can't speak at 4, make sure that he speaks, and try not to blame the school system to label him. You know what it is? Labels are okay if you try to fix it, but
Mm.
labels are not okay if you try to hide it, because you're not going anywhere. I see
Wow.
Sister Chester, Dr. Chester talking, nodding her head, because she know I'm dropping the truth right here. So I'm gonna pass it on to her. I'm gonna throw her the alley oop and make her take it right there.
Doc, you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, I absolutely agree with you, but I think there's another factor. If we're talking about responses to issue of therapy or counseling, whatever we want to call it, psychotherapy, or we as a black church, we as a church family do not embrace mental health the same way we embrace physical health.
Hmm.
And that's a problem. If we know that a brother or a sister has cancer, hypertension, going for heart surgery, listen, the prayer warriors are in front of the church. We're calling for several seasons of prayer. However, if we just get wind of a problem that somebody might be experiencing, and I want you to listen to words I use: experiencing depression, living with anxiety, dealing with schizophrenia, we are out the front door. We do
Wow.
not want to be associated with that person. There's no prayer. We're not calling a prayer meeting and holding a fast. We are isolating. We do not want that person to be in our circle. So the first step is for us. We have to embrace the fact that we all experience something. For you, it might be delusions of grandeur. For me, it might be severe depressive disorder. It might be bipolar disorder. It might be paranoia. It might be delusions of grandiosity. We all have something. And to acknowledge our truth is the first step as leader in our Black church. We have to first acknowledge our own truth. We don't want to do that because we're afraid that if I'm a Black minister, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, and I go to the conference office and talk to HR and talk about I need EAP, they might be looking to revoke my church because I am not
Ouch.
healthy. They might be looking to put me someplace else because I am not fit for service. When we do that for leadership, what's the message that we're sending to congregants?
Yikes.
What are we telling congregants? Hide yourself. Don't speak your truth.
So
Let's
Wow.
live.
so
Let's
can I
live.
can
Listen,
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. Let's hide who we are. The pastor that preached on Sabbath morning may not be the person Sister Brown experienced at home because Sister Brown don't even know the person that's up there pretending on Sabbath morning because she was like, oh, I wish that person came home with me because that's not who I live with. But we don't want to acknowledge that we have a problem. And if you look at the statistics, over 60% of Black ministers suffer from or live with or experience depression, anxiety, and some suicidality. But we don't want to acknowledge that we have some problems
That number
in our
sounds
life.
low.
so let me
You
jump in
don't
here
like
before
numbers,
Okay.
you don't like
let
the
me
you
jump in
don't
here
like the
before
numbers, but they don't lie.
No,
let
I
me let
said
me
the
jump in
Go
here
numbers.
ahead. Go
I
before
said the
ahead.
Pastor
numbers
Goodrich.
sound low.
No,
Uh,
well, there you go. But
yeah.
on last report, we're gonna go
Sure.
with those
Yeah.
who report.
Go
Of
ahead,
those.
Steph, or whoever was going.
Well, let me just say this really quickly. I agree with Dr. Chester. Before we go ahead, I want to make a comment, but I also want to give her an opportunity. If you weren't Pastor Paul, to give her a formal opportunity to introduce herself. So why don't we do that if that's okay with you? I'm just a guest host, but if we can have her formally introduce herself, and then I'll give my statement, and then I'll pass it to Pastor Goodrich. So
Yes.
so Dr. Chester, it is. If you don't
Yeah.
mind giving us just share, because you came in a little bit late. We had Gary, who I'll affectionately call Gary because I've known him for a while. But if you could just give us a little bit about your your background, a brief introduction, take 30, 40 seconds, just so that our viewing audience can find out who you are.
Thank you so much for that. My apologies. When I read the email, it says check in between 7:30. We're starting at 8, and that's where I was mentally. So I was just sitting here at my desk waiting for the time to log in. And the time had already passed. So my apologies for that. So I'm Dr. Ann Melville Chester. I'm a clinical psychotherapist. I'm co-founder of Tree of Life Counseling and Consulting Services. That's where I have my fun. Where I really pay my bills is I'm the division director for Metro Public Health Department in Nashville and Davidson County.
Okay. Thank you for introducing yourself. I did want to say one of the things that I'm very happy to report, and I know that it's not necessarily true across the board, but I am the HR director for South Central Conference, and we are very, very, very serious and committed to ensuring that our pastors have all of the support they need. So if anybody is watching who is a member of South Central Conference, your spouses, you are, your members, please have them call us because we have been for the last since I've been at South Central, so at least for the last 5 years, ensuring that all of our pastors have access to mental health services, and not because they have a problem, but because it's just a place of relief. Because pastoring can be a hard job. There, a lot of people are hard jobs, and that's not to minimize anybody else's. But back during the pandemic, I literally counted at Oakwood, and they had, I want to say, what the last count I had was like 62 or 64 funerals. That's more than one death a week, and that's
Week.
a lot
Right.
that our pastors are absorbing. And in addition to our pastors ministering uh, to the family, they, in addition to them losing people and just being impacted by the loss personally, they also then have to be that strong support system to a family unit and other church members potentially. So I just wanted to put that out there. I do encourage other conferences to follow suit, but we're doing
I
it.
wanted
So
I wanted to say something, Steph. We talked about EAP, and my friend Maisha Daly put it. She says Delta has 12 free sessions. Apple, I personally know, is 15 sessions. Uh, NBC Universal, over 100 sessions. Netflix, 150 sessions. Now, remember, there's 52 weeks in a year. These are free EAP sessions. So this is not for you to say that. Every pastor should know how much they have for their EAP. And here's the second thing: is not only for them. Anybody who's on that insurance gets to
yes, it's their
use it
family.
for them.
Yes,
So,
we.
so Paul's wife can use it. Paul's son or daughter can use it, and like I said, it will sit there. So when Dr. Ann or myself, and I'm going to be absolutely honest, right? And this is the only thing I'm going to hit the church on the head with. If I try to come to your AY program or your Sabbath school program and teach you about this, and
Come on
and
now,
you
preacher.
skip over me because I don't look like the person that's supposed to be saying this, all right? But then AT&T calls me and asks me to come down tomorrow, all right? Or L'Oreal asks me to come tomorrow, and I went to a place called Ferring Pharmaceuticals, who does babies. They make medicine for babies, right? I was at the Bank of Montreal yesterday. All of them know how to use their EAP, and we have conferences. We get together. We hire everybody, and you go down and you find out. If I sit down, and I've gone to 2 or 3 churches, I said, look, you have money from the state. The state pays for this, and you have money from the city to do this, and you have to jump through monumental hoops to have grief counseling. But yet, your church, and I'm going to say this, I'm not here to embarrass anybody. The 2 churches that I've ever been to is Ephesus, which is one of the biggest churches in New York City, and Bethel, which I grew up in. Right? There's a funeral almost every week. Now, you tell me as a pastor, how are you going to sustain that? You tell me as a first elder, how are you going to sustain that? Right? But the only thing that you do, which is hurtful to the family, is that every time somebody come up, Paul Goodridge comes up there and says, you'll have 2 minutes to speak, right? Where you could have a small program and go on Zoom and have an hour where everybody could talk about how great certain people are and get the same satisfaction. Or during viewing, you could go up there and speak to somebody. But we're so busy putting badges on ourselves. We're so busy showing off to everybody that you can handle rough stuff. Nobody is designed to do funerals 62 times a year. Much
No.
less, let me get spiritual on you. Let me take something from my brothers and all my good pastoral friends. We were not designed to die. So therefore, we were not designed to mourn anybody that dies. We started as sinless creatures. So
Wow.
therefore, while you are still grieving for somebody who died 30 years ago because you have not grieved correctly. The book tells us what to do with acceptance and denial. Doc will tell you all that, but there's something weaved in that says no matter what, we tell our people, don't go to the grave site, don't do this, or we talk about the witch of Endor. Man, you got to make sure you make peace with yourself so you can move on, because grief comes in waves. You turn down a certain corner. I'll tell you something. Remember Big B at the end of Jordan Lane? It's not there no more, but that's how I identify my Oakwood College. That's been
Yeah.
gone 30 years ago. So if somebody has died 30 years ago, that person's still going to be in my heart 30
Yeah.
years till today. You go in front of the library, you see my name in front of the library. That's how they memorialize Garry Graham. But I go to your church and somebody who has built your church, I don't know who built your cradle roll. I don't know who was your junior Sabbath school, who was your Pathfinder leaders, because once they die, we bury them and put them away. That's what the
And,
Black church does.
and Gary, can I jump in and say this?
Yes, dear.
If
Yes,
we
Doc.
think about COVID, because you mentioned it, so let's go back there for a minute. COVID taught us how to isolate. It taught us how to socially isolate. It taught us how to hide. It taught us how to rely on ourselves. It taught us how not to rely on others. It taught us how to keep secrets. It taught us how to uh, uh, avoid intimacy and avoid connection. And can we just say COVID is not gone, but it's on
Mm.
the low. We're still hiding. We're still socially isolating. We're still avoiding connection. We're still pretending like we have not been affected by what happened to us. We do not. We sit in church and tell people when their loved one passed, they're in a better place. In what better place? What better place? They're in the ground. Is that better than being in the bed down the hall? What do you mean when you say they're in a better place? And we have that rhetoric that we tell to people almost as if it is not okay to cry when you lose your spouse of 20 years and 30 years, when you lose your children, when you've lost your marriage. Like, it is not okay to experience sadness. We all want to come and praise the Lord because Jesus has promised to take it all. Yes, he has, and I'm a believer. I'm a fifth generation Adventist, but he also promised to take my tears. He says, I'll wipe the tears from your eyes, which means it's okay for me to cry. So can somebody let somebody weep until they have worked through the stages of grief and not make them think they have to show up the next week? Praise the Lord. No, you have to show up and say, I am sad. I am missing my loved one. I need somebody to talk to. We have to normalize the fact that it is okay not to be okay. We have to
Yes.
normalize that it's okay to not be okay. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to tell someone, listen, we're from some clinicians in the church. We don't even want to give clinicians in the church an opportunity to speak to the church. What I find really outrageous is that we will go find a 1 day old expert that just came off the graduation stage 10 states away from where we live and bring them in and pay them $10,000, $15,000 to talk to our congregation who doesn't know our congregation. But we will not allow the people that worship
Had to throw
together,
that in there.
the people that dwell together, the people that sing together, the people that pray together to talk to each other. We go get a 1 day old expert that has no knowledge of our congregation, and we promote the Jesus out of them and make them okay with our congregation. And the rest of our congregation is like, who is that? Okay, so they wrote the
Right?
book, they graduated from Andrews. Okay, so does a few of my colleagues in the church. We don't want to do that. We don't want to say it's okay to step outside and go meet Sister Chester in the choir room and talk to her. We want to bring the 1 day old expert, don't even have a license, don't know the principles of counseling, don't understand ethics, and won't keep your secret. We want to bring
Wow.
that person in
Gotta
and
do it
give them
again.
the new sermon the next week when they talk in this church, instead of normalizing the fact that it is okay to not be okay and we should talk to each other. We don't want to,
Lord.
Wow.
and that is what's killing us in the church.
Lord.
Okay.
Ooh-wee.
So, all right. So I hear what you're saying, Dr. Chester. But here's the thing. many of us within, Gary, you talked about EAPs and you talked about potentially EAPs with the job, but there are some individuals who either may not be in a job that will offer that, but yet they also need counseling. But one of the hardest things to find are counselors who, either with a sliding scale or free counseling or something, which is also a barrier for individuals to be able to get the help that they need. What can we do? And then you have individuals who may have profession in terms of counseling, etc., that they do it Monday through Friday. They're not trying to necessarily um, spend more time on the weekends or whatever dealing with individuals in their congregation, especially if they're not going to be remunerated for it. How would you address that?
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you,
Mm.
Lord. Have mercy.
Mm.
I'll let you take this one because there's a.
Here's how we address that.
Go,
The
go ahead.
same way we invest $35,000 in the music ministry in the church, the same way we invest all this money in making sure the musician get paid, the church ought to procure from their clinicians in the church a certain number of sessions that they pay for to allow the membership to go seek counseling. That's how we ensure that they can access counseling. The same way the music ministry has $40,000, it's the same way we can set $5,000 aside. We can go talk to our clinician, say, listen, the church will reimburse you $50 a session if you can. We can have a memorandum of understanding that you will see 20 of our people that are going through grief. I can tell you, we have not because we ask not. If you're coming to me as a provider, as a clinician, that where this is how I pay my mortgage, and you want everything free, and can I just be honest? The church wants everything free from clinicians because we're members. But everybody who taps the drum at the church, we give them $250. Everybody who shows up to sing special music, we give them more money. But we want professionals just to give away service because God has called us to that. He called the musician too, but we pay him $250 to sing. So all I'm saying is that the church ought to invest in the membership of the church. We have not. My fee may be one thing, but I am a member of my church. If the church asks me, can you set aside X amount of sessions to see member of the church? And here's what we can do. I'm not going to say no because my commitment to this work, why I got a doctorate as a clinical psychologist, is because the Lord told me to give up my DBA. I was arguing with the Lord, but that's a different story. But give that up and go get a PhD in clinical psychotherapy and serve His people. So I am living and walking in my purpose. He didn't tell me I was going to do it for free. He said, go walk in your purpose because he knows I still have a mortgage. But we do not want to honor that. We want everything to be free, but no disrespect to my ministers. When you go as a guest speaker to the church, you're not walking away empty handed. Somebody calling you up, handing you some envelope before you get in your church and thanking you for preaching. That's your ministry. The pastor's ministry is no less valuable than the clinician's ministry because we're all ministering in a different vineyard, yet we're still ministering. That's how we make the difference. That's one. The second thing is all of us as providers take a oath that we give away some level of service back to the community. That's a part of having our license. We have to give away some service. But once again, you have not because you ask not. So if you don't ask me, I'm just not going to volunteer to give away my service. But if you have a need, and I've seen many of my fellow congregants from churches for free because they say, I need therapy, and I will not have guilt because I turned somebody away and found out they commit suicide. See, I can't live with that. So I'm going to see you and make sure you're whole. And then I will try to find you a clinician that takes Medicare if I don't take it, or find you another continuation in the community. That's what I will do. But I'm just one clinician.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of cans, Doc, that you just opened up there, and there's some of them are some rabbit holes that we don't have time to chase this evening.
Let me just endorse everything she said. That's all I want to say.
Got it.
She's absolutely right.
I I would like to ask, still coming on the heels of the last question. We often talk about mental health in the Black community as if the Black community is monolithic, right? And I know there's, to some degree, we kind of have to do it because we're looking at it in a big population. But within the Black community, I wanted to ask this, and I don't mean to be divisive or to create something that we can't particularly nail down. But a large portion of the Black Adventist Church in North America is Afro-Caribbean.
Mhm.
Do we see differences within the Black church in terms of how those of us that have Caribbean roots, how we interface with the topic and the idea of mental health and mental health counseling and care? Is there something that we can say that addresses the issue in that part of the Black community?
Yes, because being from the Caribbean, I can answer that. I'm originally from Jamaica. The fact is, everybody had an Uncle Joe. And when you're growing up, what you hear is, oh, that's just Uncle Joe. When he's over there talking to himself, playing with his puppy, flipping on his back, oh, that's just Uncle Joe. Okay? And so we're accustomed to hearing, that's just Uncle Joe. What we've got to realize is that back then, Uncle Joe didn't know that Uncle Joe could go seek services. But now, in 2024, Uncle Joe can get services. We need to normalize the fact that it's okay to seek care. We need to normalize that, but we do not normalize that. We say, what's interesting? I was reading this study that says 90.4% of Blacks seek solace for mental health through religious involvement. What we tell people is to pray their burdens away. I want you to pray while you call 3 clinicians. While you're praying, ask God to send you the right person of the 3 you've been referred to. Okay? That's what I want. I want us to pray and ask Him, find me the right clinician, not just pray. But to pray, just like you take your car to the mechanic for a tune-up and you wouldn't take it to a plumber, if you have a mental health issues, I want you to find a clinician that's going to help you. Just like if you have heart issues, you go see a cardiologist, and you would not go see a school teacher. I want us to take our mental health the same way. In our Caribbean culture, we've been told that if you are a good Christian, you wouldn't feel sad. We've been told just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's difficult when you have no boots and you can't find your straps. You see what I'm saying? All of those things make it difficult. But if each of us reach one of us with the message that it is okay to not be okay, so let me send you some resources, it will be normalized. The next thing I'm going to say, and here's the one that might be hurting some of my pastoral friends. I want you to know that I'm still a friend of the pastor. We need to stop telling people that if they had a better prayer life, they wouldn't be experiencing the things they're experiencing. How do you pray when you're suffering deep sadness? How do you pray when you can't get up and take a shower? How do you pray when you cannot even make yourself? How do you pray when you don't know how to pray? Because prayer hasn't even come into your mind. Your life is so dark. You can't see the light of day. Where does prayer comes in? That's like telling a hungry person there are 2 grocery stores around the corner and they have no money. Instead of feeding them lunch, giving them $10 and then telling them where the grocery store is, that's the part that we don't do. How do we just tell people to pray when they don't even know how to come to lift themselves from darkness? How do we do that? Mental health issues are in, first of all, they're steep in family of origin issues. We just need to know that. Most people who are suffering from mental health issues is generation of issues that we have not yet. They bring it into the church, they bring it into their marriage, they bring it into their family, they bring it into their jobs. They are most difficult at board meetings, despicable at church business meetings, because they're dealing with all of those issues from their family of origin, unresolved family of origin issues show up in many pieces of people's lives. And there are people who are predisposed to depression, they're predisposed to anxiety, they're predisposed to paranoia, they're predisposed to schizophrenia. We need to recognize that these are things individuals live with. It's not who they are, it's the things they're living with. You're not schizophrenic, you're living with schizophrenia. You're not depressed, you're living with depression or experiencing depression. It's also about languaging and how we phrase things and how we bring them to people that makes the difference.
Wow, that's good. Gary, if you want to add to that, just I want to add another piece to that. We kind of talked about the family of origin indicators that lead to, and we kind of talked about the Afro American versus Afro Caribbean. But what about any historical indicators about how we in the either in the black church or in the black community at large, church or not, what are some of the historical indicators that inform the way we engage mental health conversations and mental health care?
So I think part of it is, I put it in the simplest terms, the hierarchy of males in the church, how we approach them. I can say over the last 4 years, I've been pleasantly surprised and happy with the amount of men that has come for therapy and amount of Caribbean men that has come for therapy. So I am a notorious code switcher. So somebody would
Okay.
not know notorious. Some of all my
Mhm.
friends know that, right? So some people don't know that I'm first generation Jamaican, and a man from Jamaica will come to me, and then he'll say something in his native patois, and it's like, yeah, I understand what's going on here, right? Or, but here's the thing: they want to. But the saddest thing is that there's two things that happens in mental health that nobody talks about, and this is why these things are on layers. A lot of men want to come, but they were not taught to. You have to brush it off, right?
Mm.
So let's say, for instance, you get licks, and when you get licks, and I run to my mother's not going to confront my dad about what he did. It stays right there, or what it happens. Then the second thing is, a lot of people don't understand you get to choose your therapist. So if I go to Dr. Ann and she's Jamaican and I'm first generation Jamaican, that doesn't mean that we we're going to move in the right directions. You'll be surprised. I'm very surprised the amount of white men and white women have come to me with their issues, and it's the same thing that comes on. Even I have to check the way I look at people, and if I'm prejudiced against certain things. Then the second thing about men is, a lot of them come to me because they see my name and they see that I'm black, and they see I'm dark skinned, and they say that I must be, and my profile says it's from Harlem, and they come over, and me and them can't even connect
Yeah.
together. Not even, because you know why? Because their wives told them to come to me, or the job told them to come to me, and so if you're forced to come to me and you're supposed to do 10 sessions so you could get your job back, ain't nothing happening. Or if you get a DUI or a DWI, they want to make sure they finish what they need to do. So it's almost like prayer, and it's almost like when you need help, whether you want to lose weight or whether you want to date that certain girl or say that certain guy, you have to put commitment into your therapy and commitment into your mental health. Got a long way to go. Even though I'm 1% of 1% at being a black male, just because you sit in my office doesn't mean I'm the right person. And let me just end with this. Here's the other surprise. Sometimes it just takes 2 or 3 sessions. I give you a good case in point. There's a lot of kids that I talk to across the United States and say, oh, my son or my daughter is having problems at school. And I said to the parents, when did you visit your child? It's like, oh no, they're at school. They're big people. So your child turned 18 years old. old and you send them to Union College and you haven't visited them in 6 months, well, I don't have the money. And I said, yeah, let me tell you what to do. Take your McDonald's money and take your cable money and go visit your child, right? Because I'm going to go back way back in the day, Stephanie, and it doesn't take a therapist to do this. I never forget the amount of white people that visited their kids in the middle of the semester for school. And their parents would come from California and Colorado and Florida and Texas just to visit their child. And all our black kids would have to wait till November or December to see their kids. You said, you forget that our kids are people too. We're homesick. And we're afraid to admit that. So sometimes it's just the simple things, Paul and Stephanie, that it takes. One, just because I look like you doesn't mean I can help you. Choose. Two, if somebody's going to force you to come see me so you don't get a divorce or you lose your job, you need to rethink before you go, because I'm going to take your money. Because that's easy money right there. No, I'm going to take your money. That's mortgage money right there. You understand? And three, no. Before you think that I can give services for free, there's a list of services that you can go before we go free. We do it for free. I hope that kind of ties everything into it.
Can I add something, Gary? So we talked about other. Let me just throw some more EAP. ECNA does 10 EAP sessions for the person. Let's say you come in with anxiety, they give you 10 free sessions. But while I'm treating you, you start talking about I'm unable to sleep, I'm eating too much, I've been calling out of work 3 times. Now I know you're experiencing some depression. So at the end of those 10 sessions, you can get 10 more sessions.
Thank you.
Depression.
Thank you.
That's what you need to understand. And so we have to tell the clinician what's going on so you can benefit. So that's ECTA. United Healthcare offers 12. Do you see what I'm saying? The same thing. Blue Cross Blue Shield offers 10. Cigna does between 5 and 10. So there are opportunities to access services. Your job is just not going to go advertise that and tell you that. If you don't let someone know that you're experiencing a problem, you'll never have an answer. The other thing I'm going to say is no one changes until what they're doing no longer works for them and they become uncomfortable. So nobody's going to change until what I'm doing no longer works for me and I'm uncomfortable with what's going on in my life. So until a person themselves say, this is not working for me. But the other thing I'll say, Gary, you can show up to me and be quiet your first session. Be quiet your second session. But by your third session, I am provoking you. I am pushing you for some reaction. I'm going to push something because you did an intake and you have some information in there. I'm going to use that information to connect with you. I'm going to start asking you some tough questions. So you're doing very well at the job, I see. I see they're looking at you for the next promotion. That's why you're here. I'm going to say things that's going to get you stimulate, like, no, I haven't had a promotion in 10 years. Oh, let's talk about that. What do you think is going on? Why you haven't yet been promoted? Training is important. Training is important. Being culturally competent and culturally relevant is important. It is shocking to me that 75% of my clientele are Caucasian individuals and only 25% of the people of color.
I bet you if you and this is legal, that if you and Stephanie ran some data, I bet you 2-to-1 that more than 80% doesn't know that they have an EAP. How much it gives?
Actually, we're gonna take a break. I think Pastor Paul's gonna jump in here, and yes, we do announce that our folks do have services. But go ahead,
listen.
Pastor
We're
Paul.
gonna ask our guests to stay right where you are. We're gonna be right back. Listen, we want to just take a little quick opportunity to break in here. We've got just about 1 or 2 questions left that we can fit in the time, but we want to stop here and thank you for joining us, our audience tonight at the Pastors Roundtable. This is season 8. episode number 8.
Mhm.
And Stephanie, if they have just joined us tonight and they didn't catch the beginning of this excellent discussion on mental health, where can they go? What can they do to go and catch it from the very beginning?
In the famous words of Pastor Henry, Dr. Henry, share, like. But you can, in the words of Roger Wade, go to the PRT.live and you can catch all of our shows, including this one today. So we encourage you to share this information. It is excellent information. We probably could go another 2 or 3 hours, but this is some good information. So we don't want to take too much more time. But to like, share, go to the PRT Live.
Yeah, PRT.live. Also, you can go there to the PRT.live, to our website there. You're going to find ways that you can support this ministry, support what happens here at the Pastors Roundtable. I was just crunching some numbers the other day, Stephanie, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know it cost this much to do what we do here at the Pastors Roundtable. I was looking at some of these subscriptions that we have that are now up to about $1,000 per year that we're coming out of pocket just for one of these subscriptions that we have to do what we do here in this streaming ministry. And so anything that you can do, we appreciate your support and your help. You can find out how to do that at the pastorsroundtable.live. Make sure
PRT.live.
Yes, I'm sorry, PRT.live, and make sure you make your way to that support page there. Again, I am joined today by our guest host, Pastor Paul Goodridge, and Miss Stephanie Scott. Our normal hosts are not able to be with us, but I see them in the chat today. Good to have Dr. Henry and Pastor Wade with us in the chat as well. We got time, Paul, for like one, maybe 2 more questions before we get up. So you guys don't go anywhere. We're going to bring our guest back right now. And welcome back, Dr. Graham and Dr. Chester, Melville Chester. Paul, take us into our next question, man.
So I want to try to go off script. I know I'm just the guest host, and maybe I'm not allowed to, but I have the mic, so I'm going to try to go off script. Because this is the Pastors Roundtable, and I know that we want to make sure that our pastors are resourced and stay relevant and keeping it real. I've heard. So I feel like as a pastor, you're kind of in a catch-22. Because on the one hand, the expectation is to be able to minister to your congregation, to be able to give them the not just the spiritual, but potentially in some way, shape, or form, counseling that they need. But also, there's an expectation from the congregation that the pastor is supposed to be there. The pastor doesn't have his own, journey that he or she is going through. So one of the things in terms of now, it's a little different in terms of the Oakwood University Church, because we have 5 pastors who are employed by the conference, but then we also have 5 lay pastors. But one of the things, we've talked about the fact that, in any given year, there could be 50, 60 funerals. One of the things that we had to decide was that even though there may be an implicit expectation from members that the pastors should be at every funeral, we've tried to make it so that we kind of divide it and to be able to protect ourselves. Because again, now it's a little different with Oakwood, but I'm thinking of the other churches in which there is only one pastor, and so the expectation is that pastor needs to be at every funeral, every counseling, every grief visitation, etc. How do we possibly mitigate that within the Black church to know that everybody needs help? Everybody needs to protect themselves as well. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying.
Paul, I can give you a real life example in that outside of the Oakwood context. In my church, between January of 2020 and the middle of 2021, we had over 90 something deaths connected to my congregation of less than 200.
Mm.
Mm.
And so I'm going to jump in and say self care. I'm going to use the word self care. The pastor needs self care of his own. Every church should have an elders board. I'm an elder in my church. And so we utilize the elders to help to minister to the congregation because the pastor needs self care. If the pastor has no self care, his life is going to fall apart just like the members,
Mhm.
and probably worse so because he's carrying guilt and a whole lot of other things because he's not able to serve. So the pastor has to have some self care. The pastor needs that level of support. Let me just say this once again, no disrespect of my pastors, great disrespect. The pastor is not the clinician. The pastor is the shepherd of the flock. His job is to feed the congregation from a spiritual level and comfort the membership. But when there is time for professional counseling, we need to let the pastor refer because we're asking pastors to carry burdens that are not theirs to carry. They can listen and give some spiritual counsel and then give three referrals. So every church should have a referral book where they can refer out so their congregants can get some assistance. It is not the responsibility of the pastor to become the clinical psychotherapist unless they're trained in psychotherapy. In our church, we have a pastor that's a licensed and trained clinician, but that's not the same for every church. So what we need to do is think about a referral to refer out. Every pastor should have a opportunity to have a referral, have some clinician at their fingertips that they have made contact with so they can say, listen, let me refer you to this person. I know they'll see you for a couple of free sessions. Let me refer you to this person. They take Medicaid and Medicare. Let me refer you to this person if you have health insurance. That's the role of the pastor, to have referrals so he can send the congregants to get assistance. The pastor can't be all things to all people. Can we just say, we hear this when I was growing up, the church is a hospital. Yes, it is. Not everybody shows up and take their medication. So you're still going to have some folks still suffering from the illness they walk into the church with. So it's not the pastor's job to be all and end all for the entire congregants. The elders board, it is the issue. Refer out. Find the resources and refer out. The pastor needs self care.
I will add
So,
that North American
sorry.
Division has now implemented, and I saw it in the chat, a sabbatical policy. I know several conferences do have a sabbatical that gives the pastor some time off. I'll also add that the conferences have very generous vacation policies for our pastors, and I see I know several of them are in chat, but they know that every time I'm speaking, I'm literally saying, please remove yourself from the God complex. You are not God. Please take some time off and let God be God. And he, in fact, is in fact the leader of the church. Now you're the shepherd, but he is the leader of the church. And so I think that there's some spiritual, though we have talked a lot about the mental health, I think there are some spiritual connections that can also be made in terms of really for pastors to take care of themselves, because once anybody realizes that God is the head, it doesn't mean that stuff doesn't happen, but it does mean that we can sometimes release some stuff without some levels of guilt in doing that. So,
And Stephanie, it's okay for someone to tell the pastor, Pastor, I see that you're a little
oh,
exhausted.
we have
I'm not saying the
we've
conference.
asked some folks to sit down, just take a
Yeah,
break. It's okay,
yeah,
and we're okay with that. I want you to. One of the things that I will say, and Pastor Paul can sort of have the last word here. But one of the things I will say is that when you have healthy leadership, you have a better chance of having a healthier church, and that's both physically and mentally. So
Yeah.
if a pastor is doing well, and I'm not saying perfection, but if they have the resources and the support that they need, then I think that the church does a little bit better,
I
overall.
agree.
So
I agree with that. And the other piece too, to think about is this. The other piece of that to think about is that the church is made up of many people. There's one pastor. It's just one pastor. And that one person is just a human being trying to make a difference in the life of 200, 100, 700, 1,500, just one person. And so they cannot do it alone. It's going to take all of us doing some heavy lifting, those of us who are officers in the church who recognize that our pastors or our pastoral staff is in need of a break, to have that gentle suggestion of, Pastor, you look a little rough around the gills. It might be
Mm.
okay to take a day or two off. I mean,
Yes.
my pastors who know me know that I'll tell them, Pastor, I don't know. It seems like something is going on. Somebody might need to
Call
check.
me, Dr. Ann. Call me, Dr. Ann.
No,
We'll,
I'm
we'll
not going to do that. I'm going to talk to them first. I'm going to let them call you. Okay, I value my relationships like that. But but I'm just
I'm
saying,
kidding. I'm
we
just
have
joking.
I know you are. We need to make it. Sometimes we have to give permission to leaders to seek help. Sometimes they don't believe they have permission because it's a sign of weakness. Okay, because we attach that to prayer life, and we attach that to connection to God, and we attach all kinds of things. And it's okay to say, I'm not just talking about South Central Conference. There are more people in South Central Conference on here. We're talking about, the
Yes.
big picture is that we
Yes.
have to let individuals know that it is okay not to be okay, and it's okay to reach out for assistance. A clinician needs a clinician.
Wow.
Okay,
Wow.
I'll say that a clinician needs a clinician. I have the great gift of having a spouse who is a clinician, who I can say, listen, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I want to talk through this, and he can do the same thing. But not everybody has that. Every clinician needs a clinician.
Listen,
Everyone
Dr. Ann,
needs
talk to us
one.
real quick. Our time is getting away from us. Some resources that our audience, our viewers can go to find more information. If you're just joining us, one of the big things we heard that some of us were unfamiliar with was that 988 number. But any
Yes.
other resources that you could recommend for pastors, for members, for parents, where they can go to help build up the mental health of the people in their home, the people in their church, the people in our communities?
211 is also another good number. Okay.
Okay.
211 will connect you. 988 is good as a crisis line, suicide prevention, those kinds of things. But 211 is a good number for finding resources. You can call 211. They can connect you with housing, with counseling, with any of those services that we need. I think 988 is a great number because it's global. You can be anywhere in the country and do 988, and it will get you the service. But also, it's you can reach out to your health department in your public health department in the county where you are. You know what I'm saying? You can go online and Google clinicians in my area. You can reach out to the APA, the American Psychological Association. You can reach out to the Marriage and Family Therapy Association. You can go on Psychology Today. There are tons of resources to find help. We're not limited in finding help. It just takes some effort. You can call your insurance company and ask them for referrals. They have all the list of clinicians that are licensed and accept insurance, all of that. And then, like I said, you can ask someone for, scales. People do that. They will say, you can say, there are clinicians that will say, I'll see you for your copay. It's $25, $45. I see you for your copay.
Okay.
And like Paul said, which is really great, sometimes you need 3 to 6 sessions, brief solution focused therapy, and it gets you through the crisis and you can get back to your life.
Good. Garry, anything to add to that, sir?
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to add is you can't be everything. One of my best counsel I got was from my wife, and I was just a young person, just married, and I wanted to be an elder in my church. I wanted to be an elder of the big Ephesus church. And she says, do you want to be that? Do you know the responsibility for that? And so I took on a ministry for men's ministry, smaller roles, and I found my ministry to be more effective where that is. You can't be everything. So therefore, a lot of responsibilities are more focused and moved into second in the way. Everything Dr. Ann said is real. The second thing that I will say is that as a mourner and a person who grieves, you don't owe anybody to go to their funeral. They don't know that you are there. Okay? But I'm going to tell you, when people need you a year from now, a year and a half from now, and I close this statement because since grief is one of my areas, my favorite story. Here, I decided to take down my carport, and my sister-in-law and my wife told me at 2 different times, Gary, please don't take down the carport. Carport is over 40 years old. She said, because these are one of the last remaining things that reminds me of my dad. Right? So you can't tell me grief is not real. Okay? And don't let nobody tell you that you can't visit a gravesite. Don't let nobody tell you that's my father's favorite song and we're not going to sing it. And don't let nobody tell you that anytime you honor somebody that was special in your life, that is minuscule. And most of all, take time for your self-care. And I think Dr. Ann will say this: I have not written a sick note that has been denied.
There you go.
You don't feel like coming to work the next day? G Money's going to write you a letter. And that's and just like you sick, nobody's going to call me back. They may look up my license in New York State. They may look it up, but I'm going to tell you right now, if I write you a letter to say that you need self-care for tomorrow, it's going to be done. You may have to pay me. You may have to pay me a fee though, but you're gonna get your letter.
Or if you need FMLA, because I am seeing you and I'm realizing that your grief is so intense that you are no good in the workplace because you're not yet good to yourself. Then we do the paperwork to help you take the time to care for yourself, and that's that we need to keep in mind. That we, what we do is we provide a service. It's more than just, you pay us a fee. There's not enough money to deal with all the things that we do. We don't pay enough, but that's not what it's about. The point is to meet the felt needs of the community and make a difference in someone's life.
Amen. Thank you so much, Doc. And we appreciate it. That's our time, everybody. We've had a great show tonight. If you missed it, if there's somebody that you know that needs to come back and watch this one, you know where to find us at the PRT. We're excited about digging in a little deeper. Who knows? We may have to do this as a part 2. I've been seeing that scrolling through the chat back and forth there. But again, a very special thank you to our special guest tonight, Garry Graham, Dr. Ann Melville Chester, our special co-host tonight, guest co-host, Pastor Paul Goodridge and Stephanie Scott. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the whole PRT team, who is that? Roger, Dion, myself, John, TJ, and Stephanie. Everybody, have a good night. We will see you next week. We're going to ask our guests to stay put. Don't sign off. We want to talk to you just before we go. Good night, everybody.
And we keep ministry relevant, resource,
yeah.
I was waiting for that, man. I was waiting for that.
Okay, let's see. Who's going to do that part? You want to do it, Paul? You want to start us off?
I start off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us at Pastors Roundtable, where we aim to help you keep ministry relevant,
resourced,
and real.
I love it. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
All right.